Oasis. Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am Scott Allen, and thanks to my daughter Kate for developing the intro to the Practical Wisdom for Leaders podcast, where we offer a smart, fast-paced discussion on all things leadership. My guests help us explore timely topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. If you haven't done so, please click subscribe so you automatically, seamlessly stay in the know when we publish new episodes. Likewise, please provide me with feedback. What do you like? What do you dislike? And what else would you like to know? And now, today's show. Brad Jackson, you are an award winner, and you've won an award. I don't think you knew that you've won an award, but you've won an award for the distance, the guest furthest from me in this moment. And I think it's you. I think you get the Distance Award. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. I am in Cleveland, Ohio. You are in New Zealand. And for our listeners, Brad Jackson is, well, he's a scholar. He is an administrator. He's a professor. He trots the globe, especially when we can trot the globe. Right now, we've probably paused on some of that. But Brad is the Associate Dean of Strategic Engagement at Waikato Management School, which is based in Hamilton, New Zealand. Brad Jackson, how are you, sir? Happy New Year.
And to you too, Scott. Kia ora to you and your listeners. And thanks very much. It's great to be awarded for coming the furthest, although distance in some respects has, this particular year has just become so much more compressed. It's been a marvelous experience to be able to participate even more globally than I was historically through digital contact. And great, you've had a great lineup of speakers, and lovely to be able to join this and to wave the flag for Oceania here.
Well, sir, you've been exploring this topic of leading in place. And you have another award that I want to give you, but that's going to be later in the episode. So I'm going to keep you in suspense. But let's
keep me grounded.
Exactly. You have 2 awards. You didn't even know it. You're going to get 2 awards today. So leading in place. You had sent me a paper as we prepared for this episode. I looked, but I would love for you to take our listeners through some of that work. How are you thinking about leading in place? And then, of course, we have the Leadership Hexad, which I'm excited to hear about too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks, Scott. Really, what the place is part of that Hexad framework, which we've developed. Ken Parry, who God bless him, we lost him 2 years ago, but he and I co-authored a book called The Very Short, fairly interesting, quite cheap book about studying leadership. And for the 3rd edition, we were looking at a way of trying to sort of promote multidimensional views of leadership, to kind of open up our perspectives. So we were inspired by Keith Grint's 4 lenses of leadership and added and they were around person, position, and performance. And so we've added, that's it, process. Yeah, so those 4, we've added purpose and place to that to create this Hexad. That and really, it's just trying to. If you think about the way I look at it, is you've got this kind of iceberg of the way we think about leadership, and we all know when people focus on leadership, most of the work has been around the person, what's distinctive about the leader. And particularly, we tend to get very focused on those that are in positions of authority. And then we get hung up on how well they and their organization, their team or whatever, or their community are performing. What we believe is very important is that below that iceberg of attention that gets all the focus, there's these 3 other lenses, which is around process, performance, purpose and place, are really critical, but they're nowhere near as well recognized or as utilized either in media, conventional media or social media, or even in academic research. And so in particular, place is a major passion for me, and that's part of the reason why I have worked and lived in different parts of the world is because I think there's nothing like working. And if you want to get to know a place, try to change something in it. Visiting is easy. Climbing a mountain, jumping out of a helicopter or whatever, fine. But actually go into an organization to try to make something happen. You really get to know a place. But it comes by honestly, because I'm a geographer originally. My undergraduate degree was at the University of Bristol. I did a Bachelor of Science, so I got very focused on quantitative analysis of space. And then I moved to the University of British Columbia. That's what brought me to North America to do my Master of Arts, my MA in Geography. And that was all hermeneutic, interpretive approaches, so no numbers, and all about meaning. That was sort of the basis of my education. In particular, if you think about my undergraduate was all about understanding space and how to analyze and make sense of space. And then my MA was just about place, an important distinction. And I suppose as you go through your career, particularly as you get towards, quote, the twilight phase of your career, you tend to think about, hang on, where did this all start? And you start to go back to your original passions and interests. And so what I've been sort of quietly and slightly more noisily doing recently is looking at what I call a geography of leadership. So in other words, we've talked a lot about the fact that psychology and leadership tend to, they've had the tight reins on the field for a while, but sociologists have got in there, political scientists, philosophers, including scientists, etc. now, and arts. What about a geography of leadership, and what would that bring to bear? And it's so that's essentially why I thought, look, this is something that we've talked a lot about context. And it's usually acknowledged sort of in a fairly grudging way at the end to say, well, of course there's a context in which it happens. And it's sort of usually in the last part of a PhD, people say, oh, and this, there are some specific contextual issues here, blah blah blah. What I wanted to do is to say, if you put place for first and foremost, how does that then change what comes to bear in leadership?
Wow. So tell me a story about that, Brad. Unpack that a little bit. Maybe even give me an example, right? What do you? I'm really, really intrigued by this because I think you're exactly right. I think you're right on a number of things for sure. I mean, of course, contexts, Barbara Kellerman talks a little bit about leader, followers, context. She calls it her leadership system. But that whole realm of context has not necessarily been unpacked. Fred Fiedler was really one of the first to, at least in contingency theory, start thinking about it's not just the leader or the followers, right? There's a context that's in play. But you're unpacking this context in a different way, and I love it. I think it's a lot of fun. So tell me more.
Yeah, because I think the other thing that's important about context, situation, a number of people have foregrounded that, but I don't think it tends to play a sort of subsidiary role. There is a recognition that it's important, that it acts on what behaviors and relationships, but the piece that hasn't been is the way in which place can be an active resource and a constraint in leadership. So it's actually a dialectical relationship. And, you mentioned the hexatic. The hex is basically trying to promote when you say, well, hang on, what's the relationship between the person and the place in leadership, or the performance and place or process? But my particular passion, I think you've had Steve Kempster on the show primarily, is we have a sort of twin passion for the role of purpose and the way, and so what we've been working on is this sort of notion between purpose and place, the relationship. So, look, to give you, an example, I guess where I got really, thinking about the importance of place and leadership was really my encounter moving to Aotearoa in New Zealand in '99 from Canada. In the university and other communities, we are brought on to what's known as the marae, which is a meeting house for the Māori, and essentially the local iwi bring you on through a pōwhiri. When you spend time, so you spend the night as a group there, you are encouraged to provide a mihi, which is basically talking about who you are. And one of the things that you're asked to talk about is, and it's your whakapapa, which is your lineage, which, who are, your ancestors, because they play a critical role in influencing leadership. That's another topic, by the way. But you're also I encourage you to talk about your mountain and your river. And as someone that's sort of moved around an awful lot, I must admit I really struggle with that. Say, well, what is my mountain and my river? And the whole idea is that these are kind of critical anchors for who you are and what you're about and what you stand for. And so for a long time I struggled. I hail from, my family's from Leicestershire. I wasn't born there. I was born in Germany. But so I sort of focused on the Beacon Hill, which is the sort of the oldest rocks of Europe, and the River Soar and the Grand Union Canal as that. But I thought, isn't it interesting? I have trouble with that, and yet I found that remarkably grounding when I did do that process. And so, whenever I go back to England, which was last October 2019, I always make a point of going to Beacon Hill and going down to the river and where the river meets the canal, and really sort of thinking, yeah, that's a lot about who I am, and an awful lot of. So in this incredibly digitalized world, where, it's everything is fast moving, connected. We, if you like, business schools have played a critical role in, quote, destroying the challenges that distance and time plays. It's that actually we may have lost something very important in terms of who we are and what we're here to do, which is sort of anchored in place. So I'll let you pick up on that.
Would you talk a little bit more about the mountain and the river and kind of the thinking behind those two? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, there's a strong spiritual connotation to that in Maori cosmology about the creation. And so these mountains and rivers and seas, it's a very important part of that. But it actually... It does, we tend to think of, okay, mountains, that's got to be the Himalayas or the Andes or whatever. But in actual fact, it's actually looking, even in the Midwest, by the way, I was based on the prairies for a while, but at least I had the rock.
Brad, it wouldn't be a mountain, it would be a hill.
Yeah, well, exactly. But it's still that sense of, where you can get height, where you can get, and you start to think about, quote, the morphology, you start to think about it not just as, but it's something you physically engage with and appreciate. And it's really about that sort of timeless aspects, but recognizing it's always in play, it's always growing. And we live, in New Zealand, it's called the Shaky Isles. So we have a lot of interesting stuff happening in terms of the Earth's crust here with earthquakes, the old volcano. And so that place and the environment is so obviously important to who you are and what it's about. But we do an awful lot to, subjugate that and minimize that and push that to the side. Whereas in actual fact, and so if we think about just this COVID and the response there, how powerful that has been in terms of, I guess underlying the power of place, because people have been, quote, locked in, and they have, certainly in New Zealand, were able to walk around their immediate neighborhood and actually start to walk, slow down, see things, observe things, and in a way that I think has been quite palpable for people too. But also, if you think about the whole epidemiology, I did quite a lot of studies of that when I was doing geography, looking at the spread of diseases, and the proximity in social spaces and all that. So I think people have become a lot more conscious about where they are, the immediate environment, how well they're doing compared to other parts of the world, and where do we want people here and whatever, that kind of thing. So actually, I do think place has become so much more significant for people, and in terms of saying, well, what's it all about? Where do I need to be, and how do I interact with that environment? So, in a way, it's reinforced. And for me, I came from Australia. I had came earlier than I was planning. I had about 3 or 4 days to leave the country to get to New Zealand. My wife and I weren't sure we were going to be able to get back in. We got in. We got there the day before lockdown, and we were 2 weeks in quarantine in New Zealand. But we just felt so happy to be back in New Zealand, so happy to be home in a pandemic context, And so I guess in a way, this place issue and getting people to act and to combine to tackle this common issue has been really palpable. And, this sort of team of 5 million has been remarkable to be here, to be a part of that process. And place was central.
Would you talk about that? Tell us some stories, Brad. I'm going to tell you one quick story, and then I want to hear about what you've witnessed with the team of. You said the team of 5 million people. That was beautiful. But your story resonated with me because my family spent October in Utah, and my wife and I we travel, and we absolutely love the American West. We love being among the mountains, and it's, for some reason, it's just calming. And my wife and I were on a walk last summer, and I said to her, I just need to be among the red rocks. I just need it. And we traveled to Utah. We basically drove straight there. We stopped 5 times and didn't know anybody. We just rented an Airbnb and we kept to ourselves for a month. But on the weekends, we went to national parks, Zion or Bryce or Death Valley, and some famous national parks in the U.S. and just had an incredible, it was so grounding to be there. So your story resonates. It very much resonates for me because it was calming and it was a wonderful experience. And whether it was our kids being able to physically climb on the red rock and engage, right? It was a wonderful October, an October none of us will forget. And on Halloween, which is a big deal in the States, our children were worried because it was going to be different. And we said, well, how do we create the most memorable, incredible Halloween you've ever experienced? And we said, well, we've got a surprise. And so we ended up in Arches National Park, the 5 of us, dressed as dinosaurs, running around Arches. But again, it was this place that had history in our family, and to go back there and to be there in this just beautiful, beautiful, scenic place, it was a memory that the 5 of us will remember forever. They will never forget that Halloween, right? So your story resonates for me in a very, very beautiful way. But I want to hear about what you've witnessed, because I don't know that there's many other places on planet Earth that have dealt with the pandemic better than New Zealand. At least that's my impression. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I just to commit, to talk about the fact that this was very much a collective experience that you had, and I would sense that this was even more important to you in the COVID context than it would have been a year or two earlier. That it was a more purposeful engagement with that particular place, and certainly America West is stunning. I've just saw the movie Nomadland, much is made of Frances McDermott's performance, which was wonderful, McCormick's performance, but I think the Oscar should go to the place. I mean, that was a vital part of it was it's the South Dakota, Arizona, and Nevada. So it was very, and when I was watching the movie, I was saying, oh, that's, to my wife, that's Nevada. That's
well, it's a character.
Can
right?
never go to a movie with a geography of leadership scholar, But I think the point is, it's important that obviously these, we have strong attachments to mountains and rivers, etc., and those. But if we can harness that same sensitivity and attachment to the kind of more mundane, immediate environment that we're in, our home, our community, the organization that we're in, and give that as much of a sort of a importance, I think it might, it's interesting how that can change the leadership dynamic. And I suppose so that sort of bigger argument is what I sort of picked up on. I mean, let's face it, we have the great geographic advantage here in being remote. Because the rest of the world is remote to us. That's the way we tend to look at it. But so we are an island, and it's no accident that the islands have generally done better in the, because they're able to manage borders. But we were an incredibly integrated country. We had massive international tourists figures. We had, international students. A lot of Kiwis live overseas, etc. And so we're probably one of the most diverse populations on the planet. So it's not as if we're hermetically sealed from the rest of the world. But I think what was very important is that Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister, was able to, if you like, speak to New Zealanders in a very responsible and responsive way. And the kind of key difference that I picked up on was that compared to, say, the media messages I was getting in Australia versus, in New Zealand, was that Jacinda was sort of speaking alongside her, chief medical officer to basically, in a very calm way, considered way, speak to the 90% that were really, really keen to conform. Not just conform, but be proactive in terms of the defence there, and versus speaking to the 10% that were not. It was sort of a sense that it was always to the majority, the wiser majority, the informed majority, and did it in a way it was just involved us, made us feel very, proud of what we were doing, but also, spoke very, in a very real way about the risks. So I just genuinely felt that every night we were having a conversation because, we'd gone through the flights, we'd gone through the borders, we got there, we finally sat down in the hotel, turned on the news, and we just felt that we were being spoken to personally about this, and there was an obligation. We were clear about what our obligation was, but there was also a sort of a sense of pride that we would find a way as a country to respond to this, and to really, and I suppose the focus on localism really vital. What were the efforts being made in very remote parts of the country to sort of build that solidity and that sort of sense of. And we're not New Zealand's a pretty quiet, unassuming group. We don't like to show off. But there was just a way of showing. And what was really powerful, and this goes back to process, is this genuine collective, sort of celebrating the collective effort. So it wasn't about individual heroes or whatever. It was a sort of collective effort. And I suppose that's where that process, purpose, and place really, I think she had intuitively, so much is made of, quote, her persona and how she, but I think she intuitively, and others too, got how important it was to work around place, purpose, and process there. So that was the kind of key point of difference there.
Well, and the performance has been solid, right? And she used her position of authority to influence others. And would you say a little bit more about kind of what are some aspects of the source of, you said pride, you said collective, you used some very, very important words there. And she was a piece of that conversation. Obviously, her leadership was. But can you think of other sources of what, I mean, I love the image of you and your wife kind of sitting down in front of the TV and feeling a part of something larger. What's the source of that? Is it the place? I mean, that must be a piece of it, right?
Yeah, I think, and I do think, I go back to the fact that we are two nations, the Tangata Whanau, the founding nations, and then the more recent, the Crown and the Pakeha. So we're kind of I think that the Māori tikanga, the wisdom and knowledge, were really important part of that, and it's become critical as far as thinking about the longer term, thinking about the much broader community and beyond the immediate family, the whānau, and so I sort of that I think we've had that sort of fusion of leadership philosophies and ideas, which are very, very important too. And I think also we've had a government that's, compared to a lot of parts of the world, there's still a fair bit of trust in public servants and what the government does. We've had some very good prime ministers, very good cabinets over the last 15 years. So there's not overnight in terms of, Helen Clark, John Key, Jacinda Ardern. There's a good lineage there. So I think that stability and trust in government was sort of there, but it was done and spoken to in a very much respectful, but all about the we, and re-emphasizing and being able to emphasize small wins, things that were going well, things that needed to be addressed, apologies when they were needed. And I just feel that sort of just being able to speak to the zeitgeist, of the country, and sort of taking some pride in the fact that we were doing well relative to the rest of the world. We're quietly a competitive nation. I mean, we like to excel. We call this punching above our weight in sport and rugby, cricket, all this kind of stuff. So that there's partly that, but in a kind of constructive way. So when we did have to reverse and go back into lockdown in Auckland, I think it was quite a sting. It was like, whoa, we thought we were, and of course there's always the possibility every day that we will have to return to that, and so kind of an appreciation for that. And there's a sort of a sense now that people are probably being a bit too taking it for granted, so there's trying to inject that energy, and to say, we've got to be vigilant here as well. So yeah, and it actually, in the recent election, this was the first time the national one government had succeeded in being the only government to be able to run. And so I think it's actually paid dividends as far as her popularity and the party's popularity too. So it's reinforced that, I think, because now it's like, okay, what next? Expectations are going to need to be managed there as well.
Well, as a leadership scholar, is there anything else that stood out for you that you're observing, kind of witnessing firsthand?
Yeah, I think it's the notions that, and this is where place-based is very important, is that a lot of leadership scholarship is focused and research and development on individual organizations, teams. So what I call intra-organizations. So an awful lot of our work is still very focused that way. But really, to me, the frontier, and I was already sort of onto this and thinking about this. I'd moved into a school of government and did that because I wanted to get more into sort of systemic change, and in particular cross-sectoral change. So how do you bring disparate organizations from the business, the iwi, which is the indigenous sector, the community, and the government, public sectors, how do we get them to connect to be able to sustain focused change? And so one of the critical answers that you're not going to be surprised to is place. So if you're able to actually say, look, this place is significant, is important to people, and not only to them, but their predecessors and the next generation and the next generation. We need consistent effort there to work on what is this place, what does it need to be, how does it get there. So I suppose that's something that I've seen as being quite powerful. And I do actually see that this is going to, ironically, in a global age, I think this is going to become a key way in which we are able to make substantial change. Obviously there's this globalized efforts, but actually it's got to be done. And of course the key task of leaders, and of course, is to create the kind of collaborative governance structures that sustain that, but then the collective leadership that gives it life, gives it momentum. So I think this is going to be become increasingly important. And so that's the other thing I've noticed is this, and a lot of the people that were, there were kind of a lot of power plays and rivalries, etc. People saying, you got to check that at the door. There's something much bigger than this particular organization and its share price and all these other kinds of things. So I'm actually noticed stats, and particularly in the Waikato where I'm based, which is in the sort of central part of the North Island. Very strong Maori presence here. We have campuses in Hamilton as well as the Tauranga, which is the Bay of Plenty. We're really getting much more engaged with our place. We are the University of Waikato. We need to be much more instrumental and more interventionist there, in terms of rebuilding the place, but also the university as well. So, so much focus on connecting globally, which is important, but actually I sort of think it's an and/or thing. Really, really great universities are very much of their place, and they use that to create strong connections with other universities that are of their place too.
It's time, Brad, for me to share with you the second award. Are you ready?
Okay.
You've already mentioned it.
Yeah.
You just kind of blew past it. And you have the coolest title of any leadership book ever written, especially a leadership studies book, which is a very short, fairly interesting, and reasonably cheap book about studying. And it's all of those things. It is.
Yep.
Would you tell us a little bit about the story behind the title of that book? And then you mentioned earlier that you're working on the third edition.
Well, we've done the third edition. It was Ken Parry, who was tremendous leadership scholar. In fact, he was responsible for he was a Brisbanean from Queensland, and he was instrumental in encouraging me to move there. But he was director of the Centre for Study of Leadership at Victoria University, Wellington, when I first arrived from Canada in about '99. And I said, "So what's this leadership thing?" And he said, "Oh, so you do this and this." And I thought, well, actually, that's kind of what I've been doing for years, So we wrote a pop book together called The Hero Manager about 9 exceptional New Zealand chief executives, and reasonably popular. Gave Stephen Covey a bit of a run for his money for a little while, and then. But I got approached to write a book, a sort of crammer book on leadership, and by Sage, and I was quite keen. I was just moving into the leadership space. And I think one of the best way to learn a new field is to try to teach it and write about it early on when it's still novel to you. You're more effective at teaching in a way because you it's still a mystery. It's still exciting. And what happened is I used to be the book reviews editor for Journal Management Studies, and I got a copy of Chris Gray's book, which had that same title. And it was the first in a series, yeah. And in fact, there are a number of fields there, but leadership, I think, was either the second or the third. And what happened is, like, this arrived, and I thought, gosh, that's the book we should be writing, not this crammer, And but amazingly, I saw the book, and the next day, my publisher said, "Hey, we've got this idea. How about you do the very short, fairly interesting?" So I just grabbed it and I said, "I'm in." And then I said, "I know the very man that needs to be part of this," and that was Ken Parry. So we worked, who had a lot more experience, was a lot more knowledgeable. So really, really helped. And we just sort of said, look, let's sort of write this. I was teaching an honours course in leadership, and as I was teaching it, we were writing the book and working, what was working, what wasn't. And so it's evolved since then, and it's done, really, really well. And it's funny, a lot of people I get notes from various doctoral students around the world, even MBA students, saying, "Thank you, this book has really helped demystify this stuff," because we wrote it in a fairly humorous way, but also trying to create a more holistic, so the sort of functional instrumental work as well as the critical work, and just when I talk to business people, I always say, look, it's right about leadership that you never find in a regular bookstore. It's all that stuff. There's about the icebergs, all the stuff below in academia that most business people are blissfully unaware of. So yeah, we've done 3 editions now, and but it is trying to create a more holistic, appreciative perspective of a whole range of perspectives that we've got. It's a wonderful field to be a part of, and I've gone off to public management, public policy, social enterprise, social management, but I've always thought, no, this is my home. This is where I belong. Is with the ILA and the leadership community too. So it's a great way of keeping in touch there.
Well, and you had mentioned of Ken's passing. Is there a story that comes to mind for you about working with him that stands out that listeners would love to hear?
Yeah, and what was amazing was, he battled with pancreatic cancer, and what was amazing was how many stories that Steve Kempster and I received. We were, we took on, we put together a special issue in honor of Ken Parry, the Journal Management Organisation, and it was, I was just amazed how many people had a story about Ken Parry, how he spent time with a particular, doctoral student, or challenged a business executive, or took someone to a cricket match, or whatever, and so it was, I have a lot of, really great, personal memories from him, but what's done me, and was probably more important, is how many other people he, created stories with, and just had this lovely kind of holistic view, wasn't very judgmental, but sort of asked the ask the questions that had to be that other people wouldn't ask, if you know what I mean. So I that was the thing I sort of most valued, was this just straight, very honest approach to things. And I can remember we published this sort of book, the Hero Manager. We went to a big book launch, and they put us up in this tiny hotel room in the Hilton.
The two of you in one room,
sharing a bed together. It was kind of, it was a bit thinking, fame is not going to get
we've
to
made
us,
it.
get the better of us. Yes, exactly. And so, I was just really pleased that we were able to get the third edition out in his honour. So what's interesting, truly global perspective, because there has been a kind of divide between Europe and North America, and but actually he had a way of bringing all scholars together. Everybody knew Kent, kind of thing, and had it, And his favourite phrase was "Here's the thing." That was always what he would say. "Here's the thing." Go, oh, what's he going to say now?
Maybe that's what. Maybe we'll call the episode that in his honor. Here's the thing.
Here's the thing. Yeah. Well, this must be the place. That could be the other thing. Yeah.
Well, Brad, I hope you have a wonderful Friday. It's Thursday at 4:45 here, 4:47, and it's probably about 10:47 or 11:47 there now, a.m. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for the work that you do. Thanks for bringing this dimension. I love that connection to geography, and I love looking at leadership through that lens. It's just a beautiful way of, and you've stretched my thinking in a really fun way today in this conversation, and I know our listeners will enjoy it as well. So be well, sir. I hope you have a wonderful, I cannot wait to buy you a pint at the next ILA, I hope in Switzerland, and yes, we will catch up in person.
Quite fine Swiss beers there, actually, Scott, so I will hold you to that. But yeah, just to sort of acknowledge and to say thank you so much, Scott, for the invitation and the way in which I thoroughly enjoyed it too. It's just gone so quickly, and but just to sort of for those that are listening, and for them, to stay well, and to think about the connection to place, to use that as a really key driver for who they are and what they're about, and generations too. But to stay well, stay healthy, and we will find a way, and we are finding a way. And so go well and stay well.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Have a great day. I think our distance affected our timing a little bit. I apologize if it sounded like I was interrupting Brad, but it's always a pleasure to speak with Brad Jackson. He always challenges my thinking and takes it to new places. This whole notion of leadership and place, if you think about it, if you reflect on it, place is a central character in any event in world history. Place. And how did place shape the events that unfolded, good, bad, or ugly? For me, the practical wisdom here is to examine your own place. How does it shape you? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it ugly? How does place shape who you are, and how is it a central character? Brad spoke of your mountain and your river, which is something that I'm also going to reflect upon. Geography and leadership. Ted Bartman's talked about geography as well. I think there's something there as another way to explore this topic. How the geography impacts, how history impacts who we are and the story that's being created. Take care, everybody. Be well. Talk to you soon. You have been listening to the Practical Wisdom for Leaders podcast. If you liked what you heard, please share it with others and let them know what we're up to. And one last quick reminder to click subscribe so you know when we publish new episodes. And of course, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can stay in touch with me by visiting www.scottjallen.net or any number of social media platforms. Be well, be safe, and make a difference wherever you are on this beautiful planet. And now, here's Kate's twin sister, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.